Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Bull, as well as the latest episode of The Enemy Within. Like always, I'm going to talk about something that you want to listen to. You can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Bull, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of The Enemy Within. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Bull. A very interesting episode, and obviously it's kind of like that weird moral dilemma in a certain sense. You kind of look at it from that point of view. It's interesting on obviously many different levels. Obviously, this involves Taylor's sister, Kristen, as well as her sister or her brother-in-law, but Kristen's husband, Ralph. Because it turns out Ralph is he's a guard at a prison, and that prison ended up flooding, which led to 2 prisoners drowning. Because the thing is, Ralph is being held responsible for this because him and a whole bunch of guards ended up leaving because it was like a hurricane. Things were getting bad, and they left the prisoners unattended. The fact of the matter is they actually went 3 days without food and water because of the whole situation. And obviously there was no one, because every higher ranking person in the whole system of things ended up failing, in a sense of the warden wasn't there. They try to contact someone else, the phone lines are out and stuff like that. So it was just a series of circumstances. And now Ralph is being charged with these men's murder in that regard. So, yeah, obviously Taylor came to Bull, wanting his help with this whole situation. And obviously because it's Taylor, he's willing to, even, Taylor has to tell his sister, don't even worry about the money, don't even bring that up right now. It's okay, let's be here for his defense. Because the sad thing is, obviously, he is a, guard, and if he goes to prison, he will die. He won't last, because fortunately enough they put him in solitary confinement, but in the future if he goes to jail, he would be put in general population. So to me, what makes this whole situation an interesting dilemma? I mean, it's a sucky situation either way. It's because it's for Ralph, it's hey, I'm here. I got to save my family. My wife is pregnant. She's got my 2 kids. The fact of the matter is, a tree came down on a house. I was scared. She was begging me to come home. So for him, it's he had to choose between his responsibilities and his family. Obviously, that's a heavy ass moral dilemma because these are people whose lives are in your hand. But then obviously there's that part of you. I feel that human nature part is it comes up a little bit in the episode, but there's that whole thing of well, they are criminals, but this is my family. My family haven't done bad things. These people wouldn't be here in the first place. I'm not saying I necessarily think like that, but you can see that someone probably could think like that, So, and that turns into a thing of but still, it's either way, it's lives are in your hand, but obviously it's well, what do I do? I don't have the proper chain of command to do this. I wasn't sure which way things were going to go, because obviously all the people are leaving. They're yo, Ralph, you should be leaving too. I didn't know whether he was going to release all the prisoners and that kind of be on him, but it's I tried to morally do the right thing. It's no, he ended up just leaving all the prisoners. So now it turns to that thing, but he did it because he thought his family wasn't safe, and he thought, hey, the prison was well built enough, especially because within the past year they got some new, up-to-date stuff. So it seemed for him, it's okay, the prison's a lot safer, just I got to make sure I check on my family. So that's where things kind of stand. They're kind of at a disadvantage because of this storm. Some people didn't even bother showing up for jury duty, and other people got excused by the judge because of their respective situations dealing with this storm. So anyone left would be all the people left would be people who aren't sympathetic to Ralph's plea, the decision he made. Most of the people left behind would be people who follow the rules of no, he shouldn't have left all those prisoners alone. So there's that. And obviously, Taylor is looking into her sister's finances because it was meant to be showing see, the fact of the matter is they don't have enough money to kind of be worried about because they'd be in such a bad situation if they needed to pay off all this stuff. It's to kind of show that money wise they're not in a good enough position that they have to protect everything that they have type of situation. And ended up just stumbling across, because a lot of interesting things end up going on. It's one of the prisoners, obviously he's very sympathetic, and Marissa's why aren't you getting Benny to interject? Well, because if we do, it's just going to make it seem like Ralph is callous. So it's kind of a calculated move of not interjecting. Even though it's kind of bad, it'd be worse for them to interject. But then the prisoner ends up bringing up the fact is, And it's that thing of like what I was bringing up before. It's like, yeah, we did some bad things, but you leaving us there to literally die, that's like treating us worse than animals. animals, you know, and it's like, you can't argue with that. It's like, it's almost like our lives aren't worth anything just because we're in prison. It's like, yeah, have we done bad stuff? Yes, but we don't deserve to be treated like that. There's literally a whole thing about, you know, cruel and unusual punishment, you know, so. But he also points out that Ralph said, you know, I gotta get out of here before it goes under. So it seems like, oh, he was trying to, it wasn't about, oh, I'm getting out here to save my family. It's like, oh, I'm getting out here before this place goes under. So, which he's like, no, it's a lie. And he's getting his wife to testify. But obviously Danny and, you know, Taylor, you know, kind of look into this whole like, oh, the guy who rescued her, because by the time he got there, his family was already rescued. So it's like, you know, and he promised that he was on his way back, but the roads were so bad he couldn't manage to get back. So that's how things played out the way they did. You even had the prisoner being like the fact, well, because there was a whole argument with the warden too, because the warden tried to say like, oh, because it's like, oh yes, he would have to take them out one at a time, which would roughly take about 8 minutes, and that cell block has 22 people, so there's a good chance with the time he left, even if he was still there doing what he was supposed to do, he still, inmates might have still died, yeah, but the fact of the matter is, the warden's like, what about, you know, but at the very least, if he was there, he would have been able to hear their pleas, their cries for help. And then he quickly turns on him. It's like, oh, now that you bring that up, where the hell were you? And he's like I think he said taking his wife to her sister's place. And it's like, yeah, it's easy to kind of point the blame because a lot of the other people are involved. It's only him taking this fall for this whole situation. It's like, where was everyone else? It's kind of like, it wasn't your problem at the time. And now you're quick to throw him under the bus. So there's that. But they quickly make it seem non-sympathetic when Taylor ends up discovering, because she had noticed some deposits in her sister's account, and she ends up confronting her sister about it, and it's like, okay, so what is this all about? The fact of the matter is, ended up finding out that her sister, well, I love that Kristen tried to turn it on her. It's like, you looked into my bank accounts? It's like, yeah, I used to work with the NSA, and the fact of the matter is I do whatever it takes, and besides, I'm trying to help out your husband, so spill the beans. Where did his money come from? Because it turns out it wasn't them, it wasn't his family that Ralph was there to try and rescue. It was a bag full of $50,000 that was, you know, in the garage that was gotten hit by the tree. So it's like, that's what he had to rush back to get, which makes that situation even worse, because it makes you seem greedy, because it's like, oh, so showing so that these people's lives weren't worth $50,000. It's like, jeez, you know, that adds a whole element to that as well. And Taylor kind of has to chew her sister out for it, because it's like, she's like, I don't know where Ralph gets. It's like, no, you know it's criminal. You just didn't want to know. Because it's like, yeah, we're benefiting from it and stuff like that. We're able to pay off everything. We might even be able to afford having this actual other child that they have on the way. And it's just, you know, obviously Taylor wants to be sympathetic because this is her sister. But at the same time, it's like, you perjured yourself on the stand. And you're like, I'm literally trying to save your husband's life here, and you both lying to me. You're lying to me. Your sister who's trying to help you, because I think it also comes from that place of, you know, Taylor being the big sister. I wonder if she kind of the type of person who always had to look after her sister, where she was kind of the one always kind of having to fix her screws. It seemed like that might have been something hinted here, but it was nothing that they really delved into, so it might not be the case at all. But what was interesting, it's like Taylor was like, I got to tell Dr. Bull. And there was a part of me was wondering whether or not she would actually tell Bull, which she totally does. And it's like, well, understandable, because for her, it's like, she's not going to lie to her boss, especially because this could jeopardize everything. So, of course, she had to tell her. But Kristen's like, don't. It's like, no, like, you made things worse by lying from the beginning. But it turns out that basically Ralph was basically selling phones to like inmates and stuff like that. They were running phones. It wasn't just him, other prison guards too. I like that he tried to be like, you know, I held out for as long as possible, but obviously debt kept rising. So it's a situation where you can be sympathetic, but at the same time, you're still kind of like, you're super shady for doing what you did. The fact that you've lied this entire time about everything. So the whole way to, because even Taylor even felt the need to go, I'm sorry about this, which Benny and Bull had to be like, no, you have literally nothing to be sorry about. But this does make the situation a little complicated. So now they're going to get Ralph to tell the truth on the stand, but if he tells the truth on the stand, it's going to perjure his wife. So they kind of handle this very particularly in a way to admit, like, Ralph being like, I went back not for my wife. She was safe because they already figured like the prosecutors already had this information, and that if they don't jump on this and the prosecutors get to it first, it's going to sink their case. So it's like we got to be the ones to present it. It kind of showed that he's being honest and recognizing like why he did what he did. Obviously, whether he wants to full-blown admit like the circumstances of what he wasn't getting exactly, probably not in his favor, so he chooses not to, because that'd become a whole thing in itself of like, oh, that'd bring up other criminal charges against him. But essentially, it's a thing of like, he's like, there was some valuables, stuff that couldn't be replaced that I had to get. And, you know, once I got what I had to get, my wife only lied because she's trying to protect me. She doesn't want me to go to jail. She wants me to be there to see, you know, our newest child grow up and everything. So, doing a very good job of kind of circumventing a lot of stuff, you know. It's like for him, it's like I didn't mean for things to happen the way, like I thought they were safe, but also saying like these, it's not like these people didn't mean anything. It's like they did. I know these people. I knew who they were. The fact is, you know, telling stuff about these prisoners, and it's like, he's like, I see their faces all the time now, you know? So showing that he is remorseful and just sad that the situation played out the way he did, you know? It's like, yeah, obviously, jury manipulation in a sense, but obviously when the time comes, Bull ultimately is like, well, we both know that you're not going to get the entire, you know, at best you're going to get like a mistrial, and then we can go, oh yeah, like go through this again, but it's still going to be the same, because for him it's like, this whole thing is about my client being responsible for like those two men dying, and we both know that's not the case. It's a terrible situation that happened, but that's about it. So basically, the prosecutor's dropping the charges, but Bull had to have a sit down, and they're like, oh, they're so thankful and everything. He's like, I want you to realize I didn't do this for you. I did this for Taylor, and I did it for your kids, the ones you already have and the one that's on the way, so they can have, you know, both of you in their lives. The fact of the matter is, you're both kind of selfish jackasses for doing what you did and lying about everything, but ultimately you're not responsible for those men's death. But what you can do, what you're going to do with the second chance in life, is take, you know, $50,000 and you want to split it and give $25,000 to both the families of the men that died. And it's like, you know, even Ralph was being like, that's the deal of a lifetime, you know. So that was kind of pretty neat, and I like Taylor kind of thanking. She's like, I can. She's like, can I at least thank you? And he's like, it's a free country, you can if you want to. And she's like, oh, thank you. And he's like, no, you know, the fact of the matter is, I do whatever I can to help myself in a situation where it's like, oh, now I can lord this over you and use this to kind of get you to do whatever I need you to do. And it's like, you can't just say you're welcome. He's like, oh, well, let me try it. No, I just can't do it. And I love that. That was kind of neat. So, like I said, it just... It was just an interesting episode in that regard. I mean, you have your thoughts of like, what is the right thing to do in this case? It's look at the prisoners. But at the same time, it's just that moral dilemma of like, you know, that whole thing on the train of like, I forgot what that whole test is, but the whole thing of like, oh, here's a train track with one track, there's one person that you know, and then there's a track with like 5 different, you know, strangers or something like that. That whole dilemma, that train situation, like that whole conversation, I think is kind of applicable in this instance. You can see kind of like the, oh man, like the toughness and choice, but at the same time, it's like you still can't help but feel like in your head, it's like, oh, one's like more right than the other. It's like I said, it's a combination of extenuating circumstances. If it played out the way, obviously it didn't play out the way Ralph made it out to be, because it makes you just purely a selfish jackass, because it's like, oh, you did it for money once again. It's like, oh, that was more important than these two men's lives. You're irresponsible jackasses, but that's about it, you know? So, like I said, just very interesting episode in that regard. Next week's episode is the season finale, so I'm very curious to see what ends up going down. And now moving on to this week's episode of The Enemy Within. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. We had the FBI going after a dude named Desmond Visser. Interesting enough, just kind of little interesting detail. He was in a TV show called Limitless, where he played like, you know, security to Brian. Who was he also in that show with? Jennifer Carpenter, who was one of the main leads in the show, which I'm like, oh, that's so interesting. Like 4 years apart, and they just happen to be in the same show together. I just think that's just kind of interesting, like how stuff like that happens. I don't know. That's where my mind was. I mean, I was like, hey, it's you. But nevertheless, because he was one of Brian's handlers in the show. I'm so bummed that show was so short-lived. It was so good, in my opinion. But nevertheless, they're going after, obviously, Visser because he's connected to all this. He's connected to Alcon, which, all kind of connects him to Tall. So, but he's put himself in a Swiss embassy, so they can't really go after him. But then it turns out someone there is actually working with them to, actually trying to turn him over to the FBI. But they're not trying to just grab him up. They're actually going to, have sneak people in there, Jackie and Bragg, to try and, clone his phone and get the information off of it so that they basically, if he gets a call from Tall or something like that, then they can get the information that he ends up getting. So I do like that it's Bragg and Jackie, that there is obviously once again that thing there of like, oh yeah, there's definitely something there, because he's looking at Jackie and she's like, what? He's like, no, it's just you look nice. He's like, what? She's like, what? You surprised? And it's just like, yeah, there's definitely something there. It's kind of interesting because it all coincides with Jackie having a meeting with Melanero, because it's the whole okay, so do you trust Erica? It's like, oh hell no. But the fact of the matter is because she basically is like, oh, look at Erica Shepherd, she can't be trusted. Keaton's willing to trust her. Do you really agree with that? And for her, it's like she doesn't want to go against Keaton and her team, because her and Melanero go back because of their days in the FBI before Jackie left 6 years ago. And, it's a year after she left or whatever, it was an operation that Erica was on. There was some Russian... Russian operatives or something that Erica found out about, but rather than telling the CIA or the FBI, because it was a joint operation, she told no one, kept the information to herself. A whole bunch of, very skilled killers were coming after her, but she managed to kind of get away, and she risked that operation. Now, my mind immediately goes to the fact that's probably not 100% the truth. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. To be fair, you can't probably 100% blame that on Shepard. That just probably is a CIA thing. It seems like they kind of keep... to be fair, she kept it from her own team as well, but still, I think that plays a role in just being a CIA agent, of not knowing who you can trust, and you have this information, you need to jump on it fast and handle it yourself type of thing. That mentality of you only have yourself you can rely on, I think is a mentality that she probably strongly had at that time. So that's why I chalk it up to. But there's another part of me that's maybe Melanero is kind of twisting the story, that things didn't exactly play out like that, or maybe exactly they did. I mean, at the very least, she is giving Erica props. It's oh, the fact is y'all are trusting her. She is literally one of the most dangerous people. She is the most evasive, well-trained operatives, in a while in the CIA. And Jackie's like, well, we're well-trained too. It's because they're we got her under control. It's do you really have her under control? So I just thought that was just kind of an interesting thing. But obviously, everything at the party, at the, embassy party, doesn't go the way as planned. I do love Jackie having to pretend yo, can you pretend because that guy, he's been trying to hook up with me on, and could you just pretend that, I told him you're my boyfriend, and, it's just have a conversation with me so close, because it's just that complicated thing of trying to clone his phone and everything, and it's just having to be that close, and they were just that close to getting it. But obviously, Desmond figured out some things were wrong and takes the whole room hostage. Now it turns into a situation of Bragg ended up having to reveal himself as an FBI agent because some people kind of did some stupid things. There was a dude that was I'm gonna get, I guess he was trying to get his wife and his mother-in-law out of there, which is hey, you can respect that. He was trying to get them a chance to run away. So I'm coming up with this lame excuse of oh, she needs her medication, and I guess that was kind of him being I don't care what happens to me as long as they get away. Luckily, Bragg was there to kind of catch the bullet, but it did put him in that situation where it's oh, he had to reveal himself. So there's that whole complicated nature. And then it's all right, we're going to go in. But Shepard's no, we need to go in. You don't need a hammer, you need a scalpel, because we need to get whatever information we can from him. And, Keaton wasn't listening, so she got herself free, and lo and behold, she went in there. I love it. Yo, Erica's really, really good at that lying thing. That's what Melanero is right about. But the fact is, she's he knows exactly who she is, and she's yes, I'm Erica Shepherd. The fact of the matter is, I'm using this as an opportunity to escape because that was a conversation that got brought up earlier, because the whole thing of, you have, it's what happened, Will had asked her about what happened with the whole Hannah situation. It's like, my ex says that I can't see Hannah anymore. And he's like, are you okay? And she's like, oh, I get it. You're only asking because you're worried, because Hannah was my main reason for cooperating. The fact is that I agreed to help as long as it meant, I could see my daughter. The fact is I no longer can see my daughter. You're thinking I'm going to back out of this whole situation and have no reason to really cooperate with you. Is that what I know that's what you're worried about? He's like, actually, that's not. And I think that's kind of neat, because that shows it's like, no, I get it. He's like, especially understanding everything you did, like you looked at this bad guy to everyone's eyes, but everything you did was for your daughter's sake, and now that sacrifice, you had this opportunity and it was taken from you. So he's being sympathetic in that regard, like I said, because he doesn't look at her as the villain like everyone else does, because he knows that side of her of like she might not be the traitor everyone thinks of her to be. And I thought that was kind of a nice thing, and that kind of plays out in the episode, because Will, every chance he's giving her a chance to like, no, she's got something at play here. The fact is, like, she shows no fear either, because it's like, oh yeah, dude, Desmond's got a gun pointed to her face, and she's like, if I mess this up, it's not just gonna be, you're like, oh, you're gonna die. He's like, you're gonna die if this mess doesn't go the right way, and she's like, if it goes the wrong way, we're both gonna die. And it's just like I said, and even her kind of pleading, you almost see her almost tearing up a little, being like, I have to, like, the fact of the matter is, I spent 3 years in prison and locked up like an animal. It's like, she's really playing it up, once again showing you how much of a good liar she is, and ended up helping out with like smoke grenades, giving them an escape. She knows the blueprint, so she's able to help out with this situation. And like everyone on the team, with the exception of Will, believes that she turned, because Bragg, because even you have Jackie being like, but why? The fact of the matter is, why would she even do this? But then there's a whole conversation that Bragg has. It's like, well, the fact of the matter is, she's betrayed her country, her family, everyone. Why should we be surprised that she betrayed us too? Even Daniel being like, the fact of the matter is, why do you trust in her so much? Because it's like, what if she's not the traitor we think she is? And he's like, you almost have Daniel probably being like, wait, what? Once again, the information that only Will knows, that if he ever lets that information slip, that might be something that gets used against Erica in the future in some shape or form. Or maybe it's going to be something where it's like, how can you believe her in that regard? She could be lying. She could be playing you, so there's that whole side of things. But what's interesting, though, is when it's all said and done, Erica was able to get the information she needed. I did like the fact is that, it's like, oh, Desmond has a gun on her. He's like, and it's like, no bullets. It's like, in the moment she took the gun from, and she returned it with no bullets. And it's like, yo, dude, she's a smooth operator, dude. Took off her vest and everything so they could, to make it so that they can track the GPS after getting the information she needed. That basically Tall is planning an attack here in DC, which isn't too surprising because he is stateside, so particular reason or another. But it seems like somewhere in DC is his main target, and it's going to be like a next big attack with hundreds and thousands of people dying type of situation. So they're one step closer in this regard. Because it's interesting, because you would almost assume this has something to do with Sierra Maestra, which I would assume it would, that maybe there's a building that has a very similar design to what's been set up in Cuba with like the whole plans for Sierra Maestra. Maybe he's trying to use that as a blueprint of knowing what structural points to hit to cause the biggest casualties. That's what I'm thinking, because I would assume that like this would have something like what the connection between this and Cuba ultimately would be. So we'll see if that ends up being the case or not. But it led to a lot of interesting conversations, because one of them being the whole thing of, Will trusting her even through it all. And she's like, the fact is, I figured that you'd figure out my plan. And he's like, figuring out your plan and trusting that are two separate things. And even she's like, yeah, they totally are, aren't they? Because she took a huge risk, but for her it's like, once again, it's that whole thing of like us going against Tall. Like that's something you could always trust, is that I'm gonna want Tall. She even told Desmond the truth. It's like, no, that man ruined my life. I'm going to get him. It's like, you might die going after him. You go after Tall, you're gonna die. And she's like, maybe, which is interesting, because Desmond himself has no ties to Tall other than like they had one transaction, that's it. But he's not a believer, he's not some follower in this situation, so of course Tall's not going to tell him everything. So they pretty much got all they probably can get from Desmond in that regard. But it's interesting because obviously there's the whole thing of like, well, Shepard is got the whole because I was about to say, couldn't she make a play at the whole situation of like, oh, I'm gonna tell Tall about this, but I guess it's like that's not someone he really cares too much about. He's not someone that really knows a lot of information, so it's not like it'd be something Tall could use to put. It's not something Erica could use to put her more in Tall's favor, like she did before. So I think what we might see going forward is that Tall might break Erica out because it's like, oh, she's a good asset in that regard, or I don't know. I'm curious to see how that situation ends up turning around because, like, remember the last episode? It's like, oh yeah, like he was telling, I'm blanking on dude's name, the dude from last episode. That it's like, oh, even he was shocked because he like, oh, I completely misread Erica Shepard. So that turns into a whole conversation of like, is that what Tall has planned for her, or does he have some other plan for her? Like, what exactly, we don't know. But the fact is, it almost seems like she's playing both sides, and I think that's the point. You don't know whose side she's really on, because obviously she still hasn't told the team about the fact is of like, oh yeah, she's making these phone calls with Tall. It's like, because she's making necessary sacrifices to get the job done, because getting Tall at all costs is what matters the most. It's like you can trust in that. And then, Jackie had a conversation with Melanera because Melanera is like, the fact of the matter is, if it wasn't for that GPS, you would have never found her. She literally helped the bad guy escape. But Jackie's like, that's literally not the whole story. The fact of the matter is, from the moment she came in there, I was 100% on your side of being like, yes, she can't be trusted. And then lo and behold, she ended up bringing Desmond in and also got some intel on Tall. And it's like, because for one, she literally took off her vest. She knew it. She literally had blocked off her GPS the entire time, and it's like she wait till now. Like, that's no coincidence, So Jackie's defending her, being like, the fact of the matter is, she is someone that we can kind of trust. I was wrong about her. So are you. But then Melanera was like, the fact is, I was wrong to trust in you. You're not the person I thought you were. And she's like, I guess I'm not. Because for her, she's not going to betray her team in this regard, because she feels like she trusts Keaton's decisions on this, and she's going to have her team's back in this regard. Immediately, my brain goes, Melanera is going to find someone else on the team to kind of go after. It's the next two, Bragg, sure, but I feel more so than anybody, it's going to be Daniel or Kate. More so Daniel, because Daniel's always a more resistant one, but I think it might be Kate, because there's always that connection of like, well, Kate is, had ties to Lane. They were like sisters, but obviously Kate also has feelings for Will, so she's probably going to be like, I'm looking out for Will. She's probably going to be the one that ends up discovering Shepard has that cell phone, and that's going to complicate things. Shepard's probably going to try and explain herself, but no one's going to listen, and maybe that's going to push her to make a desperate move to try and bring down Tall, because like, this might be my one opportunity to do it. Or maybe she'll come forward about the phone situation herself once things are kind of played out in a certain role. Maybe she's still sussing out whether she can really 100% trust everybody or not. I think she's getting to the point where she can 100% trust Keaton, like, because he sees things that other team, like, the fact is, just proves that everyone on the team still kind of looks at her as like, oh, she's ready to betray us at any moment in time. But like, Keaton is like, no, I'm gonna give her a chance, so especially with everything that he's done for her, I think, so that's where my mind is. So like, if I had to bet my money on she was going after anyone next, it'd most likely be Kate. Probably be Daniel, but more so Kate in my head, just because of all of that. But ultimately, we'll have to wait and see. I'm very interested to see what the next episode has in store for us. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.